Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Healing Medicine Show. The vision for this show is to provide healthcare professionals with resources and inspiration for both personal and professional development practices, especially those that are rooted in holistic health. We believe that the change in healthcare starts by focusing on the health and the healing of the healthcare providers. I'm very excited to announce our 2024 upcoming Women's Wellness Retreat scheduled for February 3rd through the 10th. If you are interested in joining us for a week in Costa Rica, check out the link below. Today, I am so excited to welcome Dr. Jill Weiner, anti-racism educator and physician. We're going to dig into her own personal health journey, how she transitioned out of medicine into anti-racism work, and also talk about her upcoming retreat next year for women professionals in healthcare. So, Jill, we're going to dig into all of that. But first, I want to start off this interview by the way we start off all of our healing medicine interviews, which is by asking you, what does healing medicine actually mean to you?
Thanks for having me. It's such a good question. And I think for me, it's evolved over time. I think when I was burnt out, I was an internal medicine hospitalist. And when I was burnt out in 2011 and I learned to meditate, that totally changed my life. And so for me, I was like, it's a type of meditation that it's very different from mindfulness. And I just thought like, this has helped me in so many ways. This is one of the ways we can heal medicine. And then I've learned more about perfectionism and the ways that particularly I think women bring in a lot of expectations around ourselves personally and professionally and bring that in and how that impacts our well-being in all of the spaces and then I think now as I'm learning more and more about trauma and doing a lot more work in the trauma space, seeing how medical healthcare training is traumatic, all the traumas that our patients bring into us, how that informs our interactions with them and how that informs our own well-being. I think that's also big. So it's sort of evolved over time. And when you first asked me the question, I was thinking trauma. And there's all these other things that have kind of informed that.
I love that. And thank you for saying that. I think if you go back a few episodes, we spoke with Teresa Donegan, and she was a psychologist who began working with the College of Pharmacy and working with high achieving professionals, especially women. This idea of perfectionism was something that she found was actually inversely proportional to people's happiness. And it caused more burnout because, as we know in healthcare, resources are becoming more and more scarce. And as those resources are being taken away, those of us with this, commitment to perfectionism or people pleasing will step in at our own expense.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself can be a traumatic experience for people. So I totally understand what you're saying there. And I think that, trauma informed care is something that is very interesting. Helen Sairani is actually writing a book on it as well. So check out her work that should be coming out later this year. And it's, what we went through, professionally in healthcare during COVID was quite traumatic. And some peers actually have diagnosed PTSD from the pandemic experience. And so it was, I remember I was actually pregnant I found out I was pregnant in February 2020. So
no way.
so I was a patient during, during the pandemic, and it was just a scary time overall. But I think it's interesting when you take the time to slow down. And, a lot of people I will hear, I can't meditate. I've got too busy of a brain. I'm all over the place. But when you take the time to really slow down and to soothe your nervous system in that way, amazing things can happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to hear a little bit more about your transition. So you talked about being an internal medicine hospitalist. You learned to meditate. You started, I assume, kind of changing some of your lifestyle. So one of the things that we talk about on this show is lifestyle medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that we can do and the things that we can encourage our patients to do, drink more water and getting more exercise and, spending time outside in nature. What are some of the practices that you found most helpful in integrating into your day to day?
I think, I mean, I don't know. When I learned to meditate, I was just someone who was very, before I learned to meditate, very, like, if you thought about your typical, like, high strung type A anxious doctor lady, I was fun. Like, I had friends, but I think that I kind of exemplified what sometimes doctor mindsets can be. And I can only speak for doctors because I've been in that world, in that way. And so when I learned to meditate, and I always felt like a little bit disconnected from my life. I felt a little bit like I was like watching it a little from the sidelines, if that makes any sense. And I
Like
was
not the
not,
main character kind of.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I'm sure it's very selfish, but and I thought of things from my own point of view, but I just never felt like I'm living the way I want to be living. And so when I learned to meditate, it started to help me see outside of my own bubble, like I called it my
Mm.
Jill, what did I call it? My Jill bubble. And it helped me start to let go of control. And that for me was one of the big things. I already exercised. Did I do yoga then? I think I did yoga then. I was already doing Pilates then and stuff. And I traveled a lot already, but it was the incessant need to control things that I didn't even recognize that I had, and able to kind of let go of some of that and see that there's like kind of a force that makes things happen anyway. Things are happening on their own, whether or not I'm making them happen or not. And most of the time, they're turning out in a way that is better than I could have, that I was trying to make it happen. Like the wrong answer ended up being better. And now this is, I don't want to suggest this in a toxic positivity way of like everything happens for a reason and all your pain is to make you grow, because like that's harmful. But like if a patient's CAT scan was canceled or a patient didn't get discharged, I would get so frustrated and feel like I had to make everything happen. But there was always I could almost always find a reason for it. That patient got a fever that night, and if they had been discharged from the hospital, they would have had to come back, or a positive, their blood test came back with abnormal kidney function, and so we would have missed that or wouldn't have been able to address that. So just kind of letting go, and also letting go of my need to control my trainees and to have them be perfect, because I wasn't perfect, but I somehow felt like I had this need, like responsibility to control everything they did. And I think that made me a lot happier. That made my residents a lot happier. Certainly my connection to my patients was much better. And just my overall job satisfaction was a lot better. Now, like, as a result of meditating, I ended up like stopping wanting to eat meat, and I like started drinking less alcohol, but I wouldn't be like, start meditating so that you drink less alcohol. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Right.
just things shifted. I stopped wanting to read gossip magazines. I used to love Us Weekly. Like, I was addicted to Us Weekly. It was my favorite thing ever. I actually subscribed to it at one point. And at some point I was just like, I can't read this anymore. It makes me feel sick inside. And so there are things inside me that definitely shifted. Letting go of toxic friendships, that kind of thing shifted, as a result of, I think, caring for myself better.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is at the root of it. It is being honest with yourself and getting more in touch with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you talked about this idea of controlling others. This is something I really experienced when I became a mom.
Mm.
And the idea that not only do I need to be perfect, but everyone around me needs to be perfect. And I need to control how they're behaving or how they're reacting, because their reactions are also a reflection on me. So when I started really seeing, and this I think comes from a place of love and compassion, when I started seeing everyone as, this divine being with their own path and their own challenges, and realizing that they're going through just as much as I am, you can be a little bit more compassionate with them. You can kind of start to let things slide and go with the flow and just kind of really be present in the moment with more clarity than if you're trying to anticipate everything that's going to happen in the future and can kind of control that. So not only is it a happier, much easier way to live, it also kind of helps you let go of the pressure of always being on and always being perfect, and really allows that authenticity to shine through. And that's what I think drives away some of the relationships that aren't so authentic and pulls in the more authentic relationships that that so many of us really crave, is that deep connection, because there's also an epidemic of loneliness happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask, as you moved outside your Jill bubble and
Mm-hmm.
these things started to shift and your perspective started to change, at what point did you start becoming interested in the anti-racism work?
So it took a while, but I think it would not have happened the way it did without meditation for explicit and implicit reasons. So I stayed in medicine for several years after learning to meditate. I was happy enough. Like I felt like my burnout was better and I was happy enough. I think because I was meditating, and it sort of started to shift the way it helped me connect in with myself more, which I had not really done before. And I had this sense that I wanted to do, there was something different for me. And that never involved leaving medicine. Initially, I was like, oh, I'll move to Iowa if I got a job in Iowa, or I'll like do something different in hospital medicine. I decided to become a meditation teacher, which was 3 months in India, and always thought I'd come back and practice hospital medicine part-time and teach meditation part-time. But with the meditation practice that I do, it like kind of has helped me, I'll say, be more resilient and be open to other forms of self-improvement and other ideas. And
kind of the gateway drug to
yeah, and like
so many other ways of perspective.
Help me tolerate being wrong, and help me tolerate like going into a defensive fight or flight mode, for example. So I was meditating, went to my meditation teacher training, came back from India, moved back to Atlanta, went because I decided not to go back to my job in Chicago, and decided to teach meditation full time. And when the 2016 election happened, I wrote this blog post called "We're All Going to Be Okay, I Promise." And all my white friends loved it. And like some of my Indian friends loved it. And like some of my gay friends loved it. And a woman that I was on the verge of not being friends with anymore, is like really, really teetering on the ends of our friendship. A white woman, is a sociology professor, sent me an article, said, "Dear white women, please stop telling us it's going to be okay." Written by a Black man. And I was like, ooh. And she said, "I just want you to know that like you're speaking from this place of spiritual authority," because I was brainwashed in my meditation teacher training to think that I was like all knowing. To the whole other conversation. But she said, "I think it's very privileged and worth," and sent me that article. And I was like, what is she talking about? I'm not racist. So I had the whole like moment of shutdown and denial. And then I was like, well, crap, I don't want to be this privileged thing that she's talking about. I don't see myself as racist. So like, let me read a book to prove her wrong. Basically, like I wanted to explore it, but I also wanted to just like read it to confirm what I already knew about myself, was that I'm amazing. And the first book I read was called "But I'm Not Racist," and I'm forgetting the name of the author. And it turns out like I was hella problematic and I had all sorts of stuff to learn. And so that was just like personal journey learning about it. And then in 2019, I went on an allyship training led by Leslie Mack and Paige Ingram, that like was teaching white people how to show up basically, and to join the movement. And I remember thinking like, what if I go? Like, am I supposed to be an activist? I don't even know what that means. And I was so scared to go. I almost didn't go. And I had another like kind of aha defensive moment, but I recovered from it really quickly. Like it was a big thing that happened. Not a big thing that happened. It was like a conversation at dinner where I was like frustrated about some aspect. And then I was like, oh, and I just had this moment of kind of what another way that privilege shows up that was a little bit different, because I had this moment of like, I've been taught that I'm this amazing, because I'm this doctor and I became a meditation teacher. Everyone should trust me and everyone should think I'm amazing, because that's what that's the stuff I was being fed. I'm watching my language. That's what I was being fed. And then I realized, like, Black people don't have to trust me. Like, I haven't proven myself in any way. And like, I show up in this world assuming that I'm trustworthy, and that's not the privilege that a lot of people have. So that was kind of the thing, but I recovered from it really quickly. And so I was talking with the women who were leading the retreat, and they were like, what if I could use some of the tools that I use, meditation and EFT tapping, which is something that I am also use as a human, and also I'm a practitioner. What if I could like use some of these tools to teach white people how to like manage their stuff, manage their emotions, manage their discomfort in anti-racism spaces, so they can show up in a way that contributes to change rather than centering ourselves and causing harm. So that's kind of how conscious anti-racism started, because my meditation was called Conscious Health Meditation and Wellness. So then it was Conscious Anti-Racism. And I was initially just like, I got no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just trying to like contribute in some way that feels authentic. And then the following year connected with Maisha Claiborne, Dr. Maisha Claiborne, who you know, who's my business partner now. And we
have interviewed on this show too.
Yes. And when you and I connected, we didn't know that we knew her in common. And so then we sort of rounded out the perspective to include I was intentionally just trying to take some of the emotional labor away from Black people of having to like deal with white people who didn't know how to regulate themselves in these situations, because we weren't taught to. We didn't have to, because we have the privilege. So anyway, so she joined, and we sort of added broadened what we do, and also broadened our audience, because our work really is impactful for people of all identities. It just can be used differently. It can be applied differently. And so that's kind of how my self-care world of like ways that were helping me in my regular life then helped me be a better white person, help me be wrong, help me understand I can be wrong. I can get defensive. It's okay. I can have my entire notion of who I am and what I am threatened, and like learn and come out of it and actually see things better from another person's perspective, rather than keeping my blinders on because it doesn't feel good. So I hope that tied it all in.
It totally makes sense. And I think kind of what I'm hearing is, as you became more, more comfortable with this discomfort, and I always say that like the more comfortable you can be in those uncomfortable situations is the more you grow. Yeah. So I love that your personal journey, and this is kind of mirrors my own, your personal journey and the personal development and self-improvement practices that you were doing, were kind of in a way parallel to your professional journey. And as one thing grows and moves forward, then the other can, because they're so closely linked. So as you experience, and I will say this for myself, when I get that feedback, when I feel triggered, when I feel shame, when I feel that resistance to something that someone is saying, instead of instantly putting up that wall and going, nope, that can't be right. That can't be right. That's not me. This person is wrong. Being comfortable enough with yourself to go, okay, let me actually hear this. Let me spend some time. I'm not going to instantly agree with whatever criticism is coming towards me, but let me sit with this. Let me begin to examine it. Take some time. That's what I think meditation allows you to get some space from your emotions. So you have the emotion of like shame or defensiveness or whatever. And when you can give yourself like just a few seconds between that emotion and your reaction of what comes out of your mouth, then you can be in that, what Dr. Joe Dispenza calls the generous present moment, where you're able to really think about, what do I want to say? How do I want to show up in this way? And then going to, something like the retreat that you went to learn some tools, to learn some skills about, how we are prejudiced by our upbringing. I was born and raised in Arkansas, and there are definitely some things that I grew up with that I didn't necessarily view as problematic. specifically some sports team names,
Mm.
um, local local sports teams names. Um, there are some high school teams named the Rebels and the Redskins, and
Mm.
these high school sports names that like I just grew up and it was just that was just how things were. Now that I have grown and changed, and in my adult life, I see some of these things as very problematic. How can we, as white women or white people, show up and begin to begin to try to view our prejudice and change that perspective, and what can we actually do to make a difference?
Ooh, it's a big question. I don't know if I can answer it, fully, but I think cultivating the ability to be wrong and cultivating our ability to listen, to understand, rather than listening to prove someone wrong. And recognizing that whether we want to hear it or not, the world was set up for people with white skin to thrive. It was set up for us to belong and to keep other people out. And now people may not agree with that. I think it is fact. I don't think it's anything to be agreed with or disagreed with. And there's many like facts I can cite and training I can recommend for people. That's not necessarily, we don't focus necessarily on the history of all the laws in our trainings, but the world was set up in a certain way to keep us from having to like think about anything else other than like, I go through life, I work hard, I do well. Like I have struggles too. Like my, and recognizing that in the context of learning other people's perspective. And then I think the other most important thing is being able to hold more than one truth at one time.
Yes.
And without going into any other details about it right now, the situation happening in the Middle East is a very, very prime example of that. I'm a Jewish woman, and I was afraid to bring my own Jewishness into anti-racism spaces because I didn't want to be taking up space. But until I sort of reconciled my own like internalized anti-Semitism, I was able to show up with that identity, and I can hold space for Black folks and other people of other identities, knowing that like they're not equal. They're never going to be equal. I don't know what it's like to be them. My lived experience is much more privileged. I've also had some stuff, but it doesn't have to be like a competition. It's not like a zero-sum game. And so being able to hold truth, like I see myself as a good person, and I have done very problematic things in my life. I don't want to be wrong, and I often am. There's things for me to learn. I don't know all the answers. I think that is a skill that I don't know if it's possible to do like anti-oppression work without having some sense of that skill.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it becomes us or them. It becomes like, if you get something more, then I'm getting something less. And it becomes less about raising us all up and our liberation being tied up together.
Yeah. A lot of scarcity in that way of thinking, that there's only so much. And when we can really move into this, this respectful place that, I think it's human rights. And one thing I think the pandemic taught me anyway is that there are certain things that affect all human beings. And we cannot say that there were any humans that weren't affected by the global pandemic. And I think that as our Earth continues to face these challenges, and both environmental and and resource wise, there is an opportunity for us to come together as a human race, and I think it's going to take a level of self-awareness and comfort with being able to hold in duality that, yes, I can be wrong and I can be trying, and so can the other person. And that compassion and that, love, I think there can be peace from that type of energy. So I think that that's also what, one thing meditation has given me is the ability to stay in that vibration of calm,
Mhm.
peace, compassion. More so than I'm not perfect either. I definitely get, have triggers and have resistance and have all of those things. But um the self-awareness that it brings, I would highly recommend. We talk a lot on this show about the different practices that people use, like journaling, like meditation. You guys have heard me recommend the insight timer a couple of different times, but also the life-changing power of a transformational retreat. So Jill, in our time coming to a close, I want to ask you a little bit more about your upcoming retreat next March, because it sounds absolutely fabulous, and it actually falls on my birthday. So tell us a little bit about what the retreat is and what healthcare professionals can expect from the retreat.
Sure. First off, I want to just kind of um, express my I don't know what the word is, but like happiness, or because when I know you offer retreats and you have this retreat center, and you asked me like, what are you offering? And I told you that you're like bringing it into the space, even though you also offer retreats. I think it's like so lovely to have that spirit of generosity and that spirit of abundance rather than scarcity of like, I can't talk about, and I would have totally understood if you didn't want to talk about mine. So I just want to honor that and thank you for that. So I do a retreat in at Miraval Spa in Arizona. That's where I kind of had my, before I actually learned the meditation practice that I do, I had like they call it your Miraval moment, but I had a moment there with one of their horse activities where I was like, oh my God, the world is different than I think it is. There's more to this world than I'm seeing. So that was my like first shift. So I like bringing groups back there. The spa is amazing. I teach my meditation course. The women who attend the retreat have tons of free time to like explore and do all the things. I pay for everyone to do the horse activity that I did. I do a tapping workshop, and it's the Miraval is life changing, and I think the meditation practice that I teach is life changing. Putting those both together, it's like people get to take the spa home with them. So it's for all women, anyone who identifies as a woman in healthcare. So it's not just for doctors. It's got some CME and CE accreditation credits that are available. So yeah, 4 nights, and I do it once or twice a year, and I love it.
That sounds absolutely fabulous. I have not done the equine exercise and equine therapy, but I've followed the work of Martha Beck, I believe, and that that really speaks to me. And so I want to just thank you so much for your advocacy and for sharing more about your work. I think it was very inspiring. And, like I said, our goal here is really to provide that source of inspiration, but also practical resources and tips for healthcare professionals to move forward. And I think focusing on our own healing so that we can heal the healers in healthcare is what our goal here has been. And Joe, you exemplify that so much. And I just want to thank you for your work and for coming on to the Healing Medicine Show with us and sharing more about it.
Thanks for having me.